I didn't dislike them at all. I just kind of heard them, was like, yeah, all right. And then I think I had a copy of Dear You, and that was the extent of my knowledge of Jawbreaker. What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review Podcast. Dude, I think we're inching up on episode 100, bro.
Wow.
We're very close.
That's wild.
I guess because I count all my episodes as like one continuous thing, so that would be with other guests included. But like, I mean, you're here for, I would say, at least 2/3 of them.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to episode 100, man. But I think it's like 91 or 92 right now. But
That's cool. It's a big accomplishment.
I think so, man. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of every time we get on here and talk about something cool. It gets. I think our flow gets better and better. It's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So,
And the topics we have this week are some kind of unique ones that you don't always hear a lot of discussion on. So
I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly. For anybody that's wondering what we're talking about, first and foremost, welcome, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. I hope everybody had a good weekend. We're talking about Newfound Glory Catalyst, which hits 20 years old in about 2.5 weeks. And then we're going to talk about Jawbreaker 24-Hour Revenge Therapy, which hit its 25th anniversary just a couple of weeks ago
30.
on February the 7th. Was it 30? Oh, dang, 30.
Yeah.
Dude, why do I keep saying 25 when I'm looking right at 1994? I've done that twice in the past couple of weeks. So JK, 20 years for Newfound Glory Catalyst, 30 years for Jawbreaker 24-Hour Revenge Therapy, even though I was looking right at the date. Which one do you want to talk about first, Rob?
Do you want to let's go on the big course of it that is 24-hour revenge therapy, and let's have some fun with Catalyst kind of at the end. And
I'm down with whatever, man. Let's do it. Okay, so 24-Hour Revenge Therapy. It came out February 7th, 1994. It's 11 songs in about 37 minutes. I had only been very familiar with the album Dear You from Jawbreaker. I wasn't the biggest fan of them. I didn't dislike them at all. I just kind of heard them, was like, yeah, all right. And then I think I had a copy of Dear You, and that was the extent of my knowledge of Jawbreaker. I listened to 24-Hour Revenge Therapy 3 times in its entirety because I couldn't really get a grasp on how I was feeling about it. I have a little bit of notes on each song. It's kind of how I do all my reviews. So what I want to do is I'm just going to let you talk first, and then I'll go through my little quick notes, and then you can respond if you have like a comment on any of it. But I want to hear what you have to say about this album, because I think I'm going to have an unpopular opinion first and foremost. Spoiler alert, but like I don't know what to think about this album and this band, bro. I am fully perplexed by their music.
You're probably not alone in that, but I would say that this album is generally what we refer to as like or what I like to think of as the other half of the pop punk emo equation. If one half of it was like the Descendants, the other half was Jawbreaker and 24-Hour Revenge Therapy. So like that is where the other part of that sound comes from, that eventually like evolves into like the mall emo sound and all that stuff that came later on in the 2000s. The origin of it for a lot of people, or at least being associated with pop punk, comes from Jawbreaker, and in particular this album. Now, Dear You is also a very influential album, even though the album itself was considered a flop. A lot of people who were into that music went on to make music and really like that album as well, although it does have a complicated legacy. But 24-Hour Revenge Therapy, it's right in the heart of the zone of everything, because it happens in 1994. And we're talking about all these big albums that happened in 1994. Well, this is another one of those huge 1994 albums. The only difference
was this that big?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only difference was the label it was on was much smaller than
Wait, what label was this on?
It was on Tupelo. It was on just a small
I knew
indie.
that. Yeah.
So that was the thing. So that was always the thing, is Jawbreaker was considered a cult band, not necessarily a big band on the underground. So everyone who was anyone kind of knew them, liked them, had their stuff, but they weren't like necessarily as mass marketed as, say, like the bands on early Epitaph and even early Fat. Like they kind of sold less than those guys, although they were probably just as well known. And it becomes from their proximity too to where they're at. So they originate a little bit in California. The singer, he goes to like art. He goes to like this real fancy art school in high school that all these like like future actors go to. And then him and this other guy kind of hook up, and they go out to college in New York at NYU. and further study out there, and then they come back to study at like Berkeley to finish up their university stuff. And the whole time, they're kind of making music, and that's sort of the origin of the band. So Jawbreaker emerges in the East Bay scene, but they're not necessarily like a teenage Gilman band. They're a little bit older. They're the people that are actually the students that are attending Berkeley that the scene is sort of coming out around. Those guys, the Rances, the Green Days, they're just a little bit younger. They're kind of like teenagers, where these are the actual young adults. So that young adulthood kind of granted them where they would play. They were big in Gilman, but they could also play in the regular punk clubs. They could play like around the Dead Kennedys and around in the LA scene. So they really had this pretty big following that I think came from that scene, but also they were a favorite of Kurt Cobain and Nirvana's. Like the first time they ever really got any run is on the In Utero tour. There was a band that canceled, and Kurt Cobain brought him on the. It was they basically Cobain was going to pick a band, and Jawbreaker was his favorite underground band, and they went on tour for 2 weeks, and then in the next two nights of show, Cobain wears the Jawbreaker t-shirt, the famous like the Salt one. He wears that. And if you look at like Jawbreaker's music, that's sort of what it's also owed itself to, because it's not like directly coming from like the Ramones core and the pop punk and all that. It's also borrowing from like grunge and all that stuff a little bit, and kind of shares with that stuff. It's kind of a fusion of those two things in once, which I think it set itself apart. It was close enough and from the scene. And definitely a part of the scene. Like they were big into. It's funny because they were so like criticized for selling out and signing to a major label, and part of that was because like a quarter of the songs, even on this album, are about like anti-major label, and they were really indie kings. Until they weren't. So that's why they very much fit into the punk scene. Like no one would question that they were punk or anything like that, but their sound was just a little bit different than everything else that was around them. I like to think of them as like almost like an emotional Bad Religion. Like Bad Religion's all like political and that kind of stuff, and this is more of like a personal band that's like a little artsy and a little bit on that side of things.
Well, yes, first and foremost. When you said a minute ago that they had, like, when you start talking about Nirvana, when I was listening to this album, and I wrote it down in my notes, so I'll skip over this part in a minute, but like, this is the bridge that connects Nirvana to Green Day. Nirvana, Jawbreaker, Green Day. It sonically speaking, I'm not talking about like I'm just saying like within sound. So if you listen to Nirvana, you might like Jawbreaker. If you like Jawbreaker, you might like Green Day, and that's how you get like grunge fans. That's their segue into punk rock music, at least in my opinion. So whether I like the album or not, irrelevant, honestly, because it's very important, clearly, just based on its sound. I like the production on it, though, quite a bit. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But there is a lot for me to appreciate and enjoy on this record. But, man, I'm telling you, I may have to give it some more time and listen to it some more. But I wasn't really feeling it, man. I tried really 3 different listens.
I'm kind of surprised by that and kind of not. On the one hand, I think you're more inclined to like this type of music a little bit because sometimes you like the stuff that's a little more drawn out and slower, but you also really don't like a lot of that early 90s rock that we're sort of comparing this to as well. So I can also kind of I can see that from where you stand, where I think you probably like a lot of the music that was influenced by this. Like when we talk about like Alkaline Trio, my God, there's so much early Alkaline Trio in this. And I always talk about like the Ataris. That's how I learned about Jawbreaker was from that. And that whole scene, like that whole scene later on that we're going to talk about, that Newfound Glory was like the Kings of, it all just kind of sounds like this with like younger bodies and more like kind of hip people doing it than who these guys were.
Okay. Yeah, I think, so here's a hot take, man.
Okay. Yeah, fire away.
I think that this band, they were older than a lot of the bands that were at Gilman, right? I think that they were the band that the young kids thought they were supposed to like because they looked up to these guys. And so they did. And when you think you're supposed to like something, you might like it more than you would have if you just stumbled upon it and had no direction.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have gotten any popularity or whatever. I'm not trying to like talk crap. This is just like an idea that I thought of that I think maybe they wouldn't have been as popular had they been the same age with the exact same music, because their peers may have been like, yeah, I'm not really into this. But the young kids looked up to it and they were like, oh no, this is really good. We're supposed to like this. The guys that are older than us are making this music. Like when I was in my like late teens, early 20s, the guys that were 25, 26 making music, no matter what it was they were making, I looked up to that. And I was
Yeah,
like, oh no, this is
they were
probably what we should be
grown-ups.
doing.
Yeah, that's like the
Yeah.
real stuff.
And
Yeah.
so I think that maybe this band wouldn't have gotten where they got, or wouldn't be as legendary as they are, quote unquote, had it not been for the fact that they were surrounded by a group of people that was maybe like a half generation younger than them, that absolutely looked up to them. And that doesn't mean that they're good or bad or whatever. It just means that I think that they maybe got that rub from that. And my hot take is that if they were the same age as them, maybe they wouldn't have got where they got and become who they became. Because their music is confusing to me, man. And I'm being facetious and like
Right.
argumentative on purpose a little bit, but I don't really know. I was perplexed by this band a number of times on on the album listen, and a couple of songs I really enjoyed, but there's a number of times where I was just like, I can't do this, man. But the vocals, dude, they're all over the place. They remind me of 17 different things, man. It's wild.
Well, and that's Blake really that's the thing I think he brings a little bit from the grunge side of thing. Like there's a lot of Cobain in that, but also I think it harkens back to like the first two like big punk vocalists in Johnny Rotten and Joey Ramone really were singers with with a voice as like an instrument that would add on to stuff and stretch words out and stretch syllables out in weird ways.
Okay, that I know, I agree with.
And I think he kind of embodied that. Like the first time, like when I was young, there were times where I thought that Jawbreaker was like a UK band with the way like he would sort of affect his accent and stuff. You know what I mean? Or I thought,
that's
I didn't think like, oh, they're just kind of another Southern California band. I had to sort of be told that to really realize that.
Well, it's kind of what I was gonna say is that I think that when I hear them, I think the way you're describing the way that he sings accurately, but his voice sounded more like Joe Strummer, that nasally, like drawn out, drony, whiny type of vocal style. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm just trying to describe it. It sounded more like.
I would say too, though, on that, this album in particular is in the wake of his throat surgery too.
Correct.
So
I knew about that.
There's even that on top of it, because I think you look at, was it Unfun and Booviac, the albums before that, his voice, I prefer his voice on this album because I like the way they fit the songs, but I think his voice was better on those other albums. And then I think his voice is either healed or tuned up pretty good on Dear You as well. Like his voice sounds the most shrill that it ever does on this album. Now, and I think it kind of adds to it, but it does.
Interesting.
It does add an element to it of like almost another instrument in a way that singers don't always necessarily do. It's almost like where that it serves as an instrument to drag stuff out on top of just the words that are being said,
That's how I listen to like foreign music. It's just I use their vocals as another instrument. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I had to go back and listen to a song off of Dear You to make sure I wasn't tripping, because I was like, I don't even think this is the same guy. Maybe I don't know this band. And I go back and listen to like, no. I had this album and I like this one. It does sound quite a bit different. I mean, you could tell it's the same dude, but like it's different.
And the funny thing about that is the thing is like Dear You, whenever they put out Dear You, it's not like they went on a major, had a hit, and then they got backlash because of that. They went on a major and everyone hated Dear You. Like it was just a total flop just because it was slightly cleaned up. Like if you look at it, the songs aren't that much different. Like I don't think like their songwriting went downhill or this and that, and the production I think is better. Like a lot of that stuff is better.
Well, that's the main difference.
But that's the problem. Quality. So that combined with them going, just the fact that they went on the major with their previous anti-major stance, it kind of wasn't given like a chance, because if you really put it up next to these albums, like yeah, of course, like you would think they would keep that. And what happened is they lost all their hardcore fans because they were such a cult band. They lost it with that album, and like unlike Green Day, who was kind of building those momentum, they weren't really able to grab the new fans. And then their music, what outside of one song of this album, which I think we'll know which one we're talking about. It's very single, like there's a lot of sing-alongs that they have. They're kind of known for that, but their music isn't necessarily accessible, and it doesn't really like grab you in that same kind of way. So that's why they didn't really work, I think, on the mainstream. Whereas they really worked on a punk level, where we get into tracks 1 through 11 and go through them all and really know the bands. And they were Jawbreaker was known for like their crowd just knowing every word to their songs, so people were really into their songs, but they didn't really have like that catchiness of the way like a Welcome to Paradise or a Basket Case just sort of gets in you, hits you, and your aunt is kind of humming along. songs like Outpatient and Ashtray Monument don't quite engender that, even though like there'll be a crowd of like, punky kids that'll singing along to it in a club. It doesn't necessarily have that same appeal. So that's why it's weird. They're sort of bound by they're limited by weird things that bands usually aren't limited by, because they have plenty of like talent and musical abilities, and all that stuff. In fact, even you could argue it was like too much. Like they stuff a lot into their songs. Like their songs are not thin at all. And, the bass player would play a lot of chords. He'd add in a lot of extra tones. The drumming is very busy. There's like a ton of guitar solos within these songs all the time. Like there's like later on, I think these bands refined bridges and breakdowns, and over here they're just kind of thrown in all over the place, and they just sort of happen. And not to say they don't go with the songs, but there are a lot of them. So the album is kind of a lot to take in.
I didn't feel like I didn't even get to experience that, to be honest with you, man. I was so perplexed by this album that there's some stuff that you're explaining that I didn't hear. Not for a lack of trying either, man. I sat down with this record twice in my car, and then the third time in this room so I could sit down and just listen to it, because I was so honestly annoyed, because I was expecting to really like it, because I heard a couple songs off of it and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. I'll probably like this.
And it's considered like a punk classic. You know what I mean? So
I don't understand how this is considered punk anything. It doesn't sound punk at all to me. It sounds like I can see like little riffs here and there, but like overall, this sounds more like just like an alternative rock record to me. Not that that's, I'm not trying to like disrespect the band or anything. I just, when I hear it, I'm like, okay,
that's probably accurate. But again, they were so a part of the punk scene, is why that's why again all the punk rock guys, like they recorded Dear You, in the same studio while Out Come the Wolves was being recorded, and like sharing equipment and stuff like that. Like, so they were.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So like Rob Cavallo, the guy that, and we're talking a lot about Dear You on this 24-hour episode, but like Rob Cavallo, the guy who I talked about last week, who kind of discovered Green Day and put them out, also produced Dear You. And when he was there, he noticed that Brett was there, and they went over to share some equipment. And the note there that Rob Cavallo made was like, the Out Come the Wolves session seemed so light. They were like skateboarding. They were all kind of hanging out, doing their thing. And the Jawbreaker sessions were so tense. And that's something that showed me. Jawbreaker's kind of similar to the Ramones in this way. They were on the verge of breaking up on every single album. Like they were they were that kind of band. So like the first album is kind of the collection of songs from when they were in college and getting together. So that took a while, and then they were going to break up, but then they had another album's worth of songs to go through. And then the dude had his throat surgery, and they were going to break up again, but they said, okay, we'll give it one last chance. 24-Hour Revenge Therapy takes off. They were perfectly okay with Dear You, because it was like a finale album for them, because that was sort of part of why that's part of why they signed to the major, because their band was kind of done. So it's like, let's get paid. And part of that was too, is having that cult hit. Again, they couldn't claim what like Rancid and NoFX and these guys who were kind of getting rich just staying on the indies. Jawbreaker wasn't. And that was a big distinction between them, is they weren't having that same kind of success, but also like, again, they were close to all those guys. I think if they wanted to, they could have just gone to one of those labels, but also the Nirvana tour really screwed with them, not with them personally, but people's perception of them. So people started branding them. This is right in the wake of Green Day making it really big. So then all of a sudden this was like, oh, this was Nirvana's little like baby band, and people like assumed they were already signed before they were, and all kinds. So their backlash. So they kind of became a little embittered towards the whole like process. It's funny because their friends didn't really abandon them. Like they said, like there was like a few negative reviews, but even Ben Weasel was like, hey, those guys are my friends. I don't care if they signed to a major, this and that. So the people that were closer weren't really mean to him the way they were to Green Day, but the people, like, the normal people, they were talking about getting spit on, getting stuff thrown at them because they had signed to the major and all that. So the fact that they went away is not really a surprise either, because like I experienced Jawbreaker again as an idea. I remember hearing. It was two things from the Ataris. I heard them cover Boxcar. The Ataris covered Boxcar. So I kind of gained an affection for that song since then. And then they name dropped them in a song about Song for a Mixtape, and they put Jawbreaker on there. And then I remember Matt Skiba talking about Jawbreaker. And then in 2003, the Lagwagon album, he just has a line, do you remember when Jawbreaker Walk the Pier, I Bet You Do, referring to Boat Dreams from a Hill. So it's a whole song of like Jawbreaker illusions. And so all the bands I liked were just obsessed with this band that didn't really exist to me. You know what I mean? Because they were just
Well,
wiped off the face of the earth, and there wasn't Spotify back then to sort of check them out. So they didn't really,
right,
they
dude,
were
that would
just
have
like
been a lot
everyone
of
else.
help.
They were kind of like the Descendants, but the Descendants were still somewhat active. So the Descendants had like albums coming out. So there was that, they had that same sort of thing as like the Spectre band, but they were even further away than all that stuff because like they're kind of inaccessible, but everyone else, everyone you like really loves them and is covering their song and always talks about it. It took till like their reunion tours and stuff they've gone on for them to really like feast off of the legacy that they kind of created.
I'm trying to think of how I first heard of Jawbreaker. I want to say it was in connection with Alkaline Trio. I believe that like my buddies that were listening to Alkaline Trio, I want to say that I was listening to Lawrence Arms, and then that's when they gave me like my buddies that knew I liked Alkaline Trio. I was listening to Lawrence Arms too. They were like, "Oh, if you like that, you might like this."
Yeah.
And then I think that's how I got a hold of Dear You, because I think I was living in Austin when when I was given that CD. But I remember liking that album. Okay, this band is weird though. I just don't really care for the vocals, man. Let me just read you some of the notes that I wrote. Real
Yeah,
quick.
yeah,
Let me
yeah.
go-
And I just want to say too, it's also one of the last comment on it is it's an album or it's a band that belongs in the early '90s that was getting pushed out in the later '90s because I think
Pretty accurate.
that's part of it too because this fits a lot better in the early part of the decade, whereas like this same music later part of the decade is like Weezer, like that's what that music kind of
Yeah.
becomes, and this is sort of
Yes.
this isn't really post grunge, but it almost would kind of fit there as well. So it's wanted. I thought of that as the Weezer point. I think is kind of relevant. They keep kind of coming up as a Spectre band on this podcast when we talk
Right?
90s.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So I'll read this real quick, man. I'm not
Yeah.
going to make it a long thing, but it says I went from track to track, just writing down a little line of text here and there. The Boat Dreams from the Hills, the first song, and I like the production a lot. The music is good, the melody's nice. And then I put the vocals are a little off to me though. Something about them, I don't know. And then on the next song, it's called Indictment. More of the same of how I felt on the first track. The vocals are like Mike Ness meets Joe Strummer. Sounds a little off in this super poppy music. Started to like it okay, I guess. Maybe not. I really can't tell. I can't get a read on this band. And then I put this may be the exact point between Nirvana and Green Day that we were talking about a couple weeks ago. And then Boxcar is the third song, and I said, "Oh, okay, this is the one that I've heard before.
Mhm.
I like this one better. I hear a little Alkaline Trio and Lawrence Arms in this song."
I would put Boxcar just to interject real quick. I would put Boxcar like if I was ever making like that top 15 list. I've always thought Boxcar would kind of belong on that list. Like it's that level of song to me personally.
wait
Like
of top 15 of their songs.
no punk songs. If I had like my
Wait, top
punk,
15?
hell yeah, I'd put Boxcar on there. I love Boxcar.
Well, have fun with that. I wouldn't even get that in a top 100 for me. But I mean, I don't. It doesn't sound. Yeah, that's dude. Top 15. That's a bold
Yeah, like
statement,
like
man.
when I just think of like those great like punk songs. If I made ever made a punk greatest hits, I'm like, okay, I'd put Boxcar. Like
No kidding. That
Yeah.
song's that good to you, huh?
yeah,
Hey, whatever, dude. I'm not going to argue with you about it. It's your list. I just surprised me. Outpatient was the next song. Not really feeling this one. Sounds too much like alternative rock that I didn't like in high school. This band is a very good gateway band or crossover band, though. Could get a lot of people into punk through Jawbreaker. Man, I'm telling you, I mirrored all this stuff already, kind of.
Mhm.
Ashtray Monument. This one kind of reminds me of the band Leatherface. Not super into it, but I don't hate it. I can see this growing on me to a certain degree. Condition Oakland. This band is super perplexing. It's like a perfect mix of grunge and punk. The vocals are going to make this a band I have to be in the exact mood to listen to, or the exact mood for to listen to. Excuse me. Boxcar is the only song that has stuck out to me until this one. Musically, the song is really great. A little long, but the composition's really good. Sounds like it could have been at the end of side A on the record, maybe. And then we go to Ache, a slower, droning ballad, sharing similarities with a band like Lucero. I can hear the influences this band had on a lot of bands that I listened to, but not necessarily liking this band.
It's
Similar
a perfect
to
analogy though of that type of those bands
Yeah.
like Lucero that were
Right.
exactly like this core. You know.
Yeah, I like this stuff that they spawned more so than the stuff that they made.
Mm.
And I put his moaning vocals, though, not doing it for me, which is weird. I love Lucero. I like Mike Ness and bands that sound similar to this band. I think it's the performance with these vocals. I really can't put a finger on it, to be honest. Next song is called Do You Still Hate Me? And I put, okay, this one is more my speed. The tempo is better. He does a better job not drawing out notes in his vocals and keeping up with the music. This is
Have you
probably my
seen the
second favorite song on the record so
the
far.
memes and the artwork that are always based around this, where it's like the little like Valentine, and on it it says like with the writing, "Do you still hate me?" with the question
Nuh-uh.
mark, and it's like
That
it's like a
sounds awesome,
cookie.
though.
Yeah, and like there's like shirts about it. Yeah.
That's rad. And then I put down on West Bay Invitational. I like the bass line in this one. Stands out throughout the whole song. Lots of Nirvana in this particular song. Jinx Removing. Man, this album just isn't speaking to me. Not sure why. It's got to be just the vocals. And then In Satting Around. Yeah, this sounds like Deftones mixed with The Clash. I'm not feeling that. So, like, I was just all over the map with my feelings on this record, dude. Like,
Mhm.
I like some of it. Like, in any given song, there's 20% of it that I really enjoy, but the bulk of it, I'm just like, man, I just can't get into it. I feel like this is the kind of record that one day there's a chance that I just put it on and it goes click, and I go, oh shit, I really like this.
Yeah, that's the comment I was gonna make to you, because it's a bit of an acquired taste.
Yes.
Which it shocks me of how big they kind of got though with that, to your point earlier, because like they grew very quickly, like once this got out there, you know what I mean? Like it was a pretty swift
I'm
movement, and even their other albums were always well received. Like they had the major offers since the first album. Like they were contagious to people, but it just, I think everything that we know of music afterwards, it just, I think maybe that taints how we look at it or something. But I get what you're saying. Like I don't necessarily agree with you, because I have a lot of fondness of this album, but I've listened
yeah.
to it a lot like over time. And again, it's not always one that I'm just like, I'm in the mood to like do something. Let me put on 24-hour revenge therapy. It's more like I want to like remember how good 24-hour revenge therapy is, so I put it on. It's
Right.
more of that type of album, for with the exception again of Boxcar, because I do just genuinely love that song, love the catchiness of it. I like the snarl of that song, just every part of that song. I just kind of love it. It's the only real like 3-chord punk rock song on the album. So maybe that's why I like it so much. Is it's more of a type of
I mean,
the
it's
other
a
type of
decent
music that
enough
I
song,
like.
but boy, I tell you, man, top 15 for that one is wild to me, man. I mean, but I mean, I'm not trying to tell you to change your mind. I just, that was such a crazy statement when you said it. I was so caught off guard.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause
Uh,
I think of like the songs that like tell like the story of punk and stuff like that. Like, and I think Jawbreaker would definitely be in there. Like, and I
really?
think like Boxcar would be the representation of that
Okay.
on there. Yeah, and it's
That's
funny because
that's
Boxcar is not necessarily the song that they would be influential for. You know what I mean? I just think it's a really good song. Like, it's more of these other songs. It's more like Boat Dreams from the Hill and Outpatient and Ashtray Monument are the songs that like the bands that we're talking about are hearing and hearing and hearing and replicating, and you know, those are like the songs that
well,
Skiba's internalizing and putting into his own spin.
Boxcar's definitely the song off the album that I like the best. That's for sure. Um, and I'm not gonna say that it wouldn't be on some list for me at some point. Uh,
And I see, and
this band's
I like the whole idea too of the lyrics of Boxcar too, of the yeah, tell me I'm not punk, I don't really give a shit.
right.
I love that as a concept. I feel like that's one of the earlier times that was a concept in a song, like in the early '90s when people were singing. Like, instead of it being the sort of accusatory, this is more of the, okay, you caught me, you know, whatever. I was passing out while you were passing
Right.
out the
Yeah,
rules.
you caught
And
me. I don't care. I'm
yeah,
a
like it,
poser, whatever.
yeah, that was it was the first instance of that. And I think it's funny that like so some people understand that and other people think of it as like a actual indictment, like, you're not punk and I'm telling everyone, like, as if I'm like telling idea, like it's great when people don't get that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's again, that Boxcar's a different song than basically everything else. Do You Still Hate Me is kind of in the vein of Boxcar, but it still has that thick sound that the rest of the album has.
Right. This is a interesting record. I feel like it's one that you should like because you should like it more so than you should like it because it's something that you enjoy. And I feel like it just got I mean, things like that happen though. Like there's albums and art and movies and books and all kinds of things that
It's one of those
you like it because you're supposed to like it, and more than you like it because you chose it and you found it and you liked it out of the wild like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, at least in my opinion.
but that's not that wasn't the case with this album though, because people did really like it, like even after the fact. Like people like it has had staying power, so it's not like
Sure, to a degree, but my point is that I think that some of that staying power comes from
well, it's
it's
sort
like
of
Clockwork Orange. That movie
yeah.
sucks, dude. But people are like,
No,
oh, it's this great movie.
to your point though, it's part of like what I would consider almost required reading if you were really just
Right.
going to be up. Like you just
That's kind of what I'm. That's kind of what
you
I
have
mean.
to kind of like yeah, you have to have what you have is you might not like the album, but do you have an appreciation? And by appreciation, I mean like awareness and the contours of it. I
Yeah,
think it's pretty important for that for its spawn of nothing else. I think if Jawbreaker would have just been a more successful band in the mid '90s with all the stuff they influenced, we may look at their whole career differently too, because it's just the way
possibly.
them falling apart. There's not a lot. There wasn't a lot of outlets like that in pop punk necessarily. There's a lot of that like '80s punk of guys that went away, but
Excuse me.
you look at the Rancids, the No Effects, and then the even like the Descendants of, they still kind of stayed around a little bit. Where they went away. I think the singer went on to form Jets to Brazil. Was
Oh
the band
wow.
that
Okay.
that he formed and just did other things until again the late 20 teens, when there was enough demand for these Jawbreaker reunions, and they played some of these reunion shows and reunion tours.
It seems to me like they were. How do I word this? Like they were destined to be underappreciated. Like if you listen to the lyrics, if you listen to the way this dude's singing and like the pain he's got in his voice, it's like, man, you're destined to be like the martyr,
Well,
and you're never gonna get there. You have to just accept that because
because he
somebody
was
has to be that.
when he wrote these songs, he's literally a university librarian. Like, so that was his day job.
That's
So
wild.
he was literally like, he's also reading every day. Like he's getting so much into like he always said um, like literature and stuff was kind of his influence on music. Like that was his core of where he got his influence from music. And you can kind of see the way it can be a little wordy and a little sort of
Right.
dense like
I
that. But
agree
again,
with that.
similar to like Bad Religion, like even if you don't kind of get it though, I think it has a bit of an appeal to people to be like, oh, I like kind of like what you were saying, like I want to know that, or I want to be in that cool kids thing. Also with that martyrdom thing is, so they didn't care again about like the small town politics of it all. So that's why the martyrdom thing kind of worked for them, because they were sort of an authority on like selling out, not selling out, this kind of thing. Because again, they were so much older and respected and kind of elder statesmen right away. Even though they're not that, they
Right.
don't really have their crap together. Like so,
Well, yeah.
this is how they broke up. Or part of how they broke up was they were touring on Dear You.
Okay.
The bass player and the singer got into a fist fight on the bus, and it spilled out into a keg party with some
Let's go.
rednecks who were gonna beat them up when they realized that they had fought out of the van into a party of rednecks
Dude, that's
in the
awesome.
middle of nowhere. That's when they realized that tour would end up being their last. So yeah, they just flat out broke up after Dear You, and Dear You put out like 2 singles. The third one never even made it to press, and it just they were just gone.
That's
They just
crazy.
there's not again there's not a lot of other flash in the pans past like the 80s like this, because like punk doesn't really have hits, so you don't really have one hit wonders. You have like guys that built like these careers, and everyone in this time period kind of got paid or got really cashed in, except for them. They're like one of the rare exceptions. Like you think of that class of '94, other than Green Day, who would still go on to have huge success, like and the Offspring, they all had like bigger albums even later on. This is the one band that peaked in '94. Like that was the peak of their career, was 24
That
Hour
is a
Revenge
good
Therapy.
point. That is a good point. That they were like, whenever these other bands were just getting started, these dudes were like cresting that top of the mountain where they were, in reference to their career. Uh, yeah, that's a. It's funny because up until recently, when I talked Jawbreaker, I just never put them in the same category as punk rock. I always put them in like the emo-y, grungy section of music.
Yeah.
But if you take apart some of their songs and listen to it like just musically and take the vocal styles out, there's a lot of good riffs in there that you could definitely see any number of like punk and roll bands taking and making their own. Like I can see, well, Lawrence Arms and Alkaline Trio, like singing it different and making it a good punk song. So I'm just talking about it to talk about it. It's just a fun conversation. I don't really care either way. People seem to really get caught up on the fact that sometimes I go, "Is that punk?" Like, who gives a shit? Like, I don't, like, it's just a fun conversation. And this is one of those bands that if you were to tell me, "Hey, where does this slide in?" I would have been like, "Oh, more over here with like alternative rock and like
Well, I think it's appropriately
hipster indie rock stuff."
Considered like kind of the Godfather album of the 2000s emo, and I think that's its appropriate place. Like it is that it's the template that all of that stuff. So like I think of Dear You even more so. If Dear You came out in like 2004, 2005, that would be a huge album fitting right next to like Jimmy World and Dashboard Confessional and all that stuff. In fact,
that's exactly the band.
It would be better than that. Like, I think it's better than that stuff because of that little bit of the punk flair that it has to it, more than that stuff even has to it. Like I don't
know if it's better than Jimmy Eat World, man. Jimmy Eat World stuff.
Jimmy Eat World's very good, but definitely I would say but a similar sounding band to like this. This would be a similar. This would be a similar template for what they did. I would definitely put this over Dashboard Confessional though, if I had to. If I had to do
they have only got like 3 songs that I like even. I never really got into Dashboard. I had some friends that liked them. I was never a big fan.
I think the
Spider-Man song was really good.
I think, Jawbreaker really translated a lot of that other music into like an alternative punky kind of form that again, those other bands, like I always talk about the Ataris because they were just heavily influenced by like they were the band. If you put Jawbreaker plus the Descendants, that's what they were. It's like they had the silliness of the Descendants and kind of that stuff, but the earnestness and the sort of the poetry sort of stylings of Jawbreaker. Same thing with Alkaline Trio has those sort of like two polar ends. I think Alkaline Trio is way more even connected to Jawbreaker. Like that's a band that I think there's just such a pure analogy between in the way that they sound and how they kind of like still fit into that punk mold too. I think they connect. I think Alkaline Trio does a good job of connecting that back. I just think maybe there wasn't a scene maybe for Jawbreaker at the time because it hadn't been created necessarily as a result of a lot of the stuff they did and other bands. But again, like you think like maybe this is more like Sonic Youth in that kind of stuff.
Yes. Well, another band that I didn't consider or think of as punk rock until we started talking was the Ataris, dude. I've never thought of the Ataris as a punk band. Still kind of don't. Doesn't matter if they are or they are not. I'm not going to argue one way or the other. I just, in my thoughts on it were like, like punk. I would consider all of this stuff like punk adjacent is a good descriptive word for me because when you say something like I never thought it was punk, I feel like that's going to be misconstrued as me saying something negative about it. And I'm like, no. I just didn't. It didn't fit it didn't check some of the boxes I was looking to check. Some of that's because I was being narrow-minded even, what I'm saying? I can fully understand that when I was 23 years old, I thought a different way than I do now. So I can look at something now and go, oh, I see where the punk influences were at in all these songs. Whereas at 20, I'm like, it doesn't sound like The Unseen. It's not punk enough for me.
But to be fair to you, Jawbreaker also doesn't sound like the Ramones core stuff that it was like made right next to either. You know what I mean? Jawbreaker is even kind of unique even within its own framework.
Yes, I definitely don't consider them Ramones core at all. I don't. Their music. I want to go back and listen to some of their instrumentals. I wonder if those are available online. I'm going to spend some more time with this band. I think.
Yeah, and I think it's good.
Which I think people are going to find funny after all what I said.
I think even going back to Dear You is helpful. Like I want to like go on a detective search of why people really didn't like Dear You because I think it's pretty good. Like I think if it just doesn't have if it doesn't have any of the context around it. And it's just their next album. I just think people would just have accepted it as their next album. Like it really is everything around it. And I really want to know, is that true? Like I want to give the people who didn't like it sort of a good faith hearing on why they didn't like it. Cause I'm sure there's good reasons of why they didn't, but I have trouble understanding why you would really like 24-Hour Revenge Therapy and then not like Dear You. I just kind of don't get that. I guess that's more of my,
because people are stupid and they want to gripe about things that are stupid. So next summer we're going to be talking about Dear You because it hits its anniversary next year. So I mean, we will have time to talk about that record in depth. I think here in the next 12 months, which sounds like a long time away. That's not very far.
It'll be here before you know it.
Yeah. So, but I do think I'm going to spend some more time with Jawbreaker. Specifically with this record, I want to listen to some instrumentals if I can find them. I think that maybe I wasn't in the right headspace for this right now. That happens to me with movies quite often. I'll get into where I have to watch a movie for a podcast, and I just am not in the mood for that movie, and it just kills it. It kills anything that I'm going to like about it. So I think there's enough for me to enjoy, even on a point in time where I wasn't interested in this kind of music, that I recognize that and go, all right, this needs to be shelved for later, not thrown away. So overall, I think I gave it like a 6 out of 10 score. What kind of score would you give this record? I would assume quite a bit higher than that, right?
Yeah, I go in the 8-9 range.
Okay.
Yeah, I share some of your. I think your concern as an album, it's not the most accessible. But I think song for song, I would rate every song very high if I was doing it in that sort of way.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I'm curious to feedback that we're going to get on this conversation. I'm sure I'm going to get roasted in the comments, but I am interested to hear reasonings, stories, recommendations, things like that. I think the comment section is getting a little stronger for us the last couple of months. Before we talk about the next album, I wanted to just take a little breather and tell you a couple of things that were funny that happened this week. So at work, the first thing, I cut the living crap out of my thumb. There is like a chunk of my thumb that's going to be missing. I was cutting an apple because I eat lots of apples these days, and I was cutting an apple at work, and my boss is talking to me over my right shoulder, and he's like standing behind me. I'm cutting an apple this way. I've cut dozens and dozens of these things at this place. I don't know how this even happened. And then I see a reflection in the mirror, so I look over at the window, and I see one of my best friends walking in. And I stopped cutting the apple. I'm not an idiot. But then I like look down and start cutting it again anyways. And my thumb's right there. Boom. Bro, I'm telling you, dude, it was raining blood in that place. It was, and it hurts. Dude, it still hurts pretty good, but it hurts so bad. And I don't do like cuts very well. Like, yeah, dude, it's been a nightmare to take care of because I don't like the way it looks. It gives me like a visual. I get like lightheaded. But yeah, so I cut my finger. But the same day, one of my favorite people that I work with, dude, JT, if you see this, man, we already miss you, dude. At work, bro, one of the managers. So so we have, let's see, Austin, Kristen, Iris, Shayna, and 5 managers. One of them is named Kristen. She gave everybody this test, all the servers, and I guess a couple of the managers, a 40-question test about the menu. All of the questions were written out, no multiple choice, and you must complete all of them, and you must get 100. First off, I don't know where this comes from. I wouldn't take the test. Just send me home. So I get a photo. Somebody goes, dude, do you see this? And I look at my phone, and the manager wrote, "This is my last day. Goodbye." And then signed it with a smiley face and slapped it down in the manager's office and walked up the door. Bro.
That's punk rock right there. That's the most punk thing we've had on this show yet. Yeah.
Bro, I couldn't believe it. And it was such one of those bittersweet things. Because I was like, man, go JT. And then I was like, yeah, I love that because I love that guy, man.
No, yeah.
He's such a good dude too. The reason he bounced though was like very, very noble, man. He was getting treated bad and it wasn't fair. Like when you think of Alamo Drafthouse, you think of like cool people with tattoos and green hair, right? Like you think of like a little more open-mindedness, right? Dude, they were telling this dude that he couldn't wear his like clothes that he wears. He's a manager. He doesn't have to wear like a bowler or anything. He just wears what he wears. But he's like a black metal guy. So he wore jeans, a t-shirt, and a black denim jacket every day. But he was always clean. He always smelled nice. And he didn't touch nobody. He kept his face shaved and his hair clean and his hair pulled back. I don't understand. But they were like pressuring him to like not wear that anymore. And then they dropped his test in front of him and he was like, I've had it. And he just bounced, bro. It was crazy, dude.
What a way too by putting it on there.
Right. Dude, I got a photo of it because I was laughing so hard. It was awesome. All right. JT is my hero. Let's see here. Okay. Let's talk about some newfound glory.
All right.
Okay. So, Newfound Glory Catalyst dropped on May 18th, 2004, celebrating its 20th anniversary in about 2.5 weeks. Clocks in at 44 minutes. And I can't remember how many songs it is. How many? It's like 12 or so?
14, I want to say.
14.
Yeah.
Okay, so 14 songs in 44 minutes. On average, not a very long song length. But I gotta say, man, it was hard to get through this record. Like
Really?
every song felt like it was taking forever. Like
Yeah. The songs are big. There's not a lot of 250 kind of songs on there. They're all full pop songs at least.
Right. So I'm gonna go ahead and on this one, I'm gonna read my notes out, and then I want you to talk after that if it's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I put the intro is one of the few intros that I like. It's kind of misleading though for the album. And then we get into all downhill from here. Excuse me. My favorite song from this band, like in their entire discography. I used to hate it, but it wore me down until I flipped. It's got a great melody, super catchy hook, and I really enjoy the lyrics on this one. One of the only vocal performances that I really like from him. And then we go into the Disaster. And on this one, I like the hook okay. The song's a little too radio rock for me. I never understood how bands like this got labeled as pop punk. They more or less sound like alternative rock with an occasional punk-inspired riff or something. Not that that is bad even, just my observation. Plus, I think this stuff has more in common with hardcore than punk, especially with Chad Gilbert being he played guitar with this band, or plays guitar, being the former vocalist of Shai Hulud, which is a metalcore band out of Florida. So there's a lot of that that started to like make me think different, okay? And then we have Truth of My Youth, decent enough song, just not my cup of tea really. Like them, the song will be okay, but the hook ruins it for me personally. It's too much pop in my punk. The riff of the verses and the bass line are gnarly, but I prefer different lyrics and vocals. I Don't Want to Know, it's a ballad, and I don't like it. Your Biggest Mistake sounds like Sum 41 a little bit, then Blink 182. And then I put, this one's all right. Very easy core. I like the melody and the lyrics are very similar to a song I wrote once. Plus, gang vocals are always good. So Your Biggest Mistake is probably one of the few songs I really, really liked on it. Then we have Doubtful. Sounds like System of a Down, and I do not like that band. Very new metal musically. The vocals don't match the song very well, in my opinion. The chorus just doesn't do it for me either. Failure's Not Flattering. Is there a synth in this song? And I put, well, I like it. The synths actually helped this one quite a bit. Right? Good palm muting verses and open catchy part as a second part of the verse. The hook is super catchy, just not super into this style of vocalist. Never have been, but I think I like the song quite a bit. Over the Head, Below the Knees, a brooding mid-paced, heavier song that again reminds me of a new metal style song. Oddly enough, I like his vocals a lot more in this song, just not the tempo and guitar riff. But on that song, the octave was down. Like I liked his vocals on that song quite a bit. Ending in Tragedy. Another ballad that I'm not fond of. The nasally vocal doesn't fit well with this type of song, in my opinion. At least I'm known for something. Opening riff is great. This one is really good. More of a metalcore, easycore song than a pop punk song. I'm pretty convinced this band isn't pop punk band at all, but just a pop core band. The term easycore makes so much sense when talking about this band now that I'm thinking about it. I was not a big fan of the sound that they spawned, I guess. Great breakdown and gang vocals in this one as well. I'd Like to Fall Asleep. More Sum 41 influence in this song. Not real bad, but not really my jam. No News is Good News. Another okay song. Decent enough, but not super memorable. Sounds like music that white girls shopping at Forever 21 think of as heavy or punk. Radio Adelaide. More new metal. I had no idea they were so influenced by that music. Very interesting.
That
I think
song
a lot of it
was never on the album too. It's on Spotify.
Oh,
now.
really?
I don't know where the hell that came from. Yeah,
interesting. Interesting.
That's not canon. Well, at least
for
the CD I had when I back in 2004. That one was.
What about Who Am I?
Who Am I was how it used to close out. Yeah.
Okay. And then I put, I am pretty shocked at how much I don't like this record. There's a handful of songs that I like, okay, but my memory of this record, I was psyched when we were like going to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And like 4 songs in, I was like, I'm not remembering this album the right way. I just don't like this kind of music. I don't like I like the dudes in the band, I think is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it objectively well made? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I like the guitar like sound. I like the production of the album. I like parts of almost every song, but there's a lot of like really just straight poppy stuff in there that I'm not really into. But the older I get, the further away from that I like, man. I think I think these days, if I want like some kind of like lighter stuff, I go more like just traditional rock and roll, if that's making any sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I was never a giant fan of this band, okay? And I don't like the bands that like are heavily influenced by them. But listening to this, I couldn't believe how much it reminded me more of like new metal and metalcore than pop punk, because I always thought of them as a pop punk band, but they're not. The Easy Core is a perfect definition.
This
for
album
them.
is not necessarily. I would not say that they are not a pop punk band. This was the Easy
Yeah,
Core album.
You're right. You're right. I'm speaking in like generalities, like general terms about the band.
This is the album that. Well, this is literally. It was. I think it was on the tour for this album where
they changed a lot with this record. I need to.
Where Jordan said the term Easy Core to sort of refer to what the sound was.
It was like on a shirt or something.
Yeah, and this isn't even necessarily what Easy Core ended up sounding like, but this was the
this is the
original idea of it kind of comes from this album. Yeah.
Right. Let me back up a little bit and let people know that I do understand that before this they sounded more like just straight like like pop punk with a different style of vocals. It wasn't like Blink-182 pop punk, but it was like an amalgamation of Blink-182 and Sum 41 pop punk without the metal influences. So like I understand like Sticks and Stones and like the self-titled, that stuff sounded more pop punk. I'm speaking specifically about this record. So my apologies if that sounded like I wasn't. I'm aware. But yes, this album just doesn't sound like a pop punk record at all. It sounds I don't really, I'm very not into this record. There's a couple of, although the second song of the album is like my favorite song they've ever done.
One of their signatures. Yeah.
It's so weird that I love that song so much. I genuinely like that song. Real quick before we go any further, let me tell you the three that I really, really liked on it, because I think I have it pulled up still. Hold on. Let's see. There we go. So I like All Downhill From Here, Failure's Not Flattering, and At Least I'm Known for Something. I actively put on a playlist. Like I like those songs a lot. So I want to give credit where credit's due. I also think this album probably ranks somewhere around like a 7 for me. 7 because it's just objectively well made. Like I can't say that it's not. But I don't care for the songs in totality. So I can't go like, it's like an 8.5 or a 9, because it's just not to me. Objectively, probably closer to like an 8.5 or a 9, but like subjectively, more like a 7. I don't know. People are going to hate me. Whatever. It is what it is.
I mean, I'm kind of in agreement. I'll give it about a 12 out of 10, 13 out of 10. I mean, do we have something to break?
Wait, do you really think it's that good?
Oh, hell yeah. Like,
okay.
I've told you, like, so
I forget you like this band so much.
Yeah, no, I always split hairs of like who is my personal favorite pop punk band, and I go back and forth between Newfound Glory and Alkaline Trio. And I think I like Alkaline Trio better as a band, but I've always said I think my favorite pop punk band is Newfound Glory, and I don't know if this is necessarily better than Sticks and Stones. And to your point, I think Sticks and Stones is more of a pop punk record. And I wouldn't even like if I had to rank these 3 albums, that one, the self-titled, even the Nothing Gold Can Stay, which sounds actually a lot more like this album than that stuff. I don't know that I would necessarily absolutely have Catalyst at number 1, but I love this version of them the most. Like this sound, and they never really even had this sound again, because like they went a little slower after this, and then they kind of went back to the sound a little bit, but were like almost like super poppy, and then now they've kind of settled in where it's sort of a combination of Sticks and Stones and this. But this version of them being loaded with all of this and them producing these songs was my favorite version of them. Like to me, this is them at their height of their powers. I loved when they brought all this other stuff into it. Like, and I liked Sticks and Stones. I really did. I like all those other albums. But when I heard this, like, this is what sold me on them being like, again, so we've talked about it before. Newfound Glory was always like the acceptable pop punk band. And again, because of their roots and because they were also very good friends with all these guys and all that stuff. And they were always, touring with them.
I mean, their guitar player was a legit vocalist for a legit hardcore band. Like Shai Hulud is a legit. I have their albums. They're like
and they were a band too that like not just because Tim and Brody were in their video and all that on the
Wait, who?
Stones.
Tim Armstrong and Brody. Dude, I thought you meant Shai Hulud. I was like, why would Tim Armstrong be in a Shai Hulud video?
No, they were in the Newfound Glory video. And I don't think it was just like a label thing or anything like that. Like they were really sort of like fan. They were probably closer to like my age. They're a little bit older than me, but they're really fans of like the Rancids and the NoFXs and those guys. And for them, Newfound Glory was kind of their version, their spin on it, coming out of Florida, coming out of the hardcore scene, doing those kind of things. And I think on this album, what they've said a lot is, so you have to remember, they sort of like, they didn't sign to a major necessarily with the self-titled album, but their label did. So they were
Yeah.
not necessarily a major label band, but they got promotion that was probably like not necessarily what say Blink was getting. Even though they did actually get promotion specifically from Blink, but like still above what
Right.
even an Epitaph or a Nitro or one of those labels could kind of give you. So they were the darlings of Drive-Thru. It's really like them and Midtown are the two bands that kind of get Drive-Thru sold or absorbed by MCA. And one of the issues that
Right.
Midtown had wasn't with Newfound Glory specifically. It was that all of the Drive-Thru energy once the acquisition happened was focused on basically making Newfound Glory this great pop band, which they did. So the videos were on TRL. Like they stood right next to all of that stuff. But I just loved when they had this album because they just wanted to bring in more of their influences. And on this album, at that point, it was MCA that had owned Drive-Thru, and then MCA folded into Columbia, or Columbia or Geffen. I think this is Geffen. Yeah, so Geffen. So the thing about Newfound Glory is every time these labels would fold, the bigger label would want to keep Newfound Glory. Like they thought they were valuable
Makes
enough.
sense.
So this album, I think, is the most genuine, you could say, as sort of like a major label album. But they didn't record it on a super long timeline, but they had a little more comfort with this. With pretty much the first three albums are songs that they had kind of since high school kind of thing, that they were throwing out and coming out with this. And this is really the first time they were really able to, I think, feel like they were a band, you know what I mean? In that truest sense of like an old school band that was really coming together and playing and bringing in all the different influences. They talked about it. They were still only like in their early 20s and they were already on like their third album. And so they'd come back to Florida, and they didn't have friends because their friends like had kids and had jobs and stuff like that. And they were getting home at like 2 a.m. every day. So they just kind of hung out with each other all the time and hung out with other bands and got kind of more creative on this. And they were into metal. They were into like 80s metal. They were into a lot of that other stuff. And their thing is like, how do we put that into like the most sugary pop we can do? Like, how do we bring all of that stuff into what was already the sugary pop?
You can hear a little bit of that.
You talk about the gang vocals and that kind of stuff. And I've always thought like Blink-182 and those bands are fast, whereas Newfound Glory is thick. And this is like their thickest album.
That's a really good description. Very, very good description. Yeah, man. Oh, dude, I had something I wanted to say and I lost it. Oh, it sucks. But yeah, man. I don't know. So here's the thing. We talk about so many bands like regularly on this show. We don't often talk about Newfound Glory. Right. I completely forgot how much you love this band, and I feel a little bad talking about it the way I did. I was just trying to I was just reacting to the songs, and I wasn't saying anything like particularly mean or anything anything unwarranted. Critical. It was all just an opinion of per song. There's enough in here for me to enjoy listening to the record. If it came on at a party or something, I'm not going to be like, turn it off. I do whatever, man. It's good enough for me to listen to, man. I genuinely forget that you like this band so much, though. It doesn't feel like a band you would like that much to me.
No, it really doesn't, because I don't like a lot of what they influence, specifically like the type of pop punk I don't like is what. And to be honest, I'm not big into like hardcore necessarily. Like, I respect it enough, but I always say like when I want my heavier stuff, I'll just go to metal. Like I'm kind of more of that. So
isn't that wild? I love hardcore.
They are kind of an outlier for me, and I don't like a lot of bands that imitated them. I really don't. I just kind of like what they do. Specifically, like they've kind of have become a bit of like a Grateful Dead for me. In that,
that's awesome.
I seen them as a kid a couple times on the Warped Tour, like whatever, that was normal. And then a couple years ago, them and Simple Plan are coming to Arizona. I'm like, I'm going to that because that's just the most ridiculous like pop punk show. This is before when we were young.
That is pretty ridiculous.
And then Simple Plan pulls out, and they've replaced with Less Than Jake. So I'm like, cool, a band I like even more comes on there.
Right.
So I just travel. I just get in my car to go see them. And then this past year, they play here in Albuquerque on a Sunday. And then the following Saturday, they're on the When We Were Young. And if you were asking me going into the When We Were Young, who we were most excited to see, I would have maybe said Blink because it was the big reunion, but then Newfound Glory would have been my next answer, even though I had just seen them a couple of days before. I don't know why I have such a connection to them. I just kind of do.
Hey man,
they're very much the pop music of like my life, though. I think like I think of them as punk because I like punk and I like that stuff. But they are my like driving around flirting with girls music. Like they are that soundtrack for me.
That's good stuff.
Like there's someone like from the 80s that's who the Cars is for them or something like that. And that is who I think Newfound Glory kind of like. I think of all like my high school relationships, they are all tied
That's
up in all these
awesome.
songs. Like
Come on, high school relationships.
That's just one of those things. And what I do like about a lot of these songs, though, I still do find them generally relatable to other things.
That's that's a testament to how great they are, though.
I think after
like whether I like them or not, irrelevant. If you can like a song and it be relatable to you 20 years down the road, great songwriting.
It also, though, sometimes it's the relatability of, I think, like these songs too. The earlier album, not so much, but I think these songs too have universal kind of appeals. It also just takes you back to a time, which also you find it to still be relatable to you in your life. I will say this album, though, also comes out in 2004. Which means like the political climate has changed. And there were another album, like this album it's not really political, no, but there's a lot of songs about more so like surveillance and news media and that kind of, and that just like part of the culture. Like that was sort of their sort of writing concept, along with the All Downhill From Here and Ending in Tragedy and those kind of songs that would be typical. But you have the intro, Truth of My Youth, I Killed to Fall Asleep, No News is Good News. And those are all kind of comments basically on it's very like 2004 when you think like the first era of like Fox News and CNN being huge and these pervasive things. Like it seems so innocent and quaint now compared to how
I can barely remember a time before that stuff existed.
No, and that's like the beginning of it. And it's also too a catalyst I have to comment is the artwork was a big thing on this album. It's got that illustration with those like caricatures.
Sorry,
yeah.
I remember what I was going to say a minute ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, you said something about the artwork. And do you remember that album that Newfound Glory put out where it was like the superhero thing? They did like a hardcore album and then like a second album or something. It was like pop punk. Do you remember that?
There was like the Joke album they did, right?
Was it a joke? I mean,
because don't they have like a joke side hardcore band too?
Maybe maybe it was a joke. I always thought it was kind of cool.
They've put out a few hardcore bands too that like I don't know if they necessarily have a label. They've kind of like brought a few hardcore bands and helped with their careers quite a bit. Newfound Glory is pretty good about like being able to embrace like, you know, being on TRL and doing all that kind of stuff and not like embarrassing themselves in those settings. But also we're always sort of like happy to be on the Warped Tour and hanging out with NoFX, you know, at the barbecue.
I mean, why would you not be happy about that? That's awesome, right?
Yeah, and I think they really appreciated like where they came from as they felt like I don't think they felt like they were ever like they kind of made it big, but I don't think they ever felt like they were necessarily like a big rock band in that kind of way. They always sort of held on to the not necessarily punk, but indie and alternative. And like, so every time they made a new album, the first thing the online report always was that like they're listening to Let's Go and Punk and Drublic for like 2 weeks straight as a band, just to, even if their music wasn't going to sound like that, just to like get in the frame of like mind of their heroes and like what it's like to make a great album. And it's like, it's cool to see like these people that kind of like a lot of the same stuff that like we like, and they sort of inspire the stuff they make off of it, even if it doesn't always come out, you know, sounding like that. It's sort of the ideal for them, and I've just always thought that was kind of cool about them. And it's also weird too because on one of those trips I've gone to, like they have a big crowd and like other people are at the hotel that I went like that were traveling to see them, but like. Man, demographically, I did not fit in with those people.
Oh, I'm sure you didn't, dude.
That were there. Yeah, I was just, for one, I might have been the darkest person any of those people had ever seen.
My man said the darkest person that any of them had ever seen. That was the wildest shit that I've ever heard you say.
It was just a heavily Caucasian group that had traveled to see Newfound Glory.
That's awesome.
And it's just,
dude, you're wild today.
It's funny because it's a band that I'll occasionally bring up. And it's funny because I didn't realize how big they were. Like I didn't realize because I grew up in the TRL era, but without TRL necessarily. Like we couldn't afford cable and stuff.
Yeah, so. I wasn't really into TRL myself. I was much more straight punk rock back then.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people though that I know that are just, you know, general people, I guess, and they talk about like, oh, you're gonna go travel to see, and they're like Newfound Glory. They're like, oh yeah, Newfound Glory from high school. I'm like, how the hell do you know them? And like I forget that they
every now and then I get surprised by stuff like that.
Yeah, they were on, and you go back now on YouTube, and they had like all this stuff was heavily promoted in the last era of like MTV's music. Like that's the one thing about pop punk is why I think it gets that like sort of MTV core sort of thing to it. Not only because it was on those channels, but it was sort of what they had in their dying days of having music. Like that's the last era of MTV music is kind of this stuff and leading into like the Fall Out Boy stuff. And then it's like, it goes to kind of fuse
Yeah,
at that
because
point, and then it's reality TV. Like this is the end of it kind of.
that's a good point. I've never really thought about it like that. It is kind of like the last era of like MTV.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah,
That's
and
wild.
I think that's why we associate that so much with like those TV shows. And like so like Catalyst, which I didn't know this till years later, like it was the songs from this album, like on those MTV reality shows though, they would still use
Okay.
a lot of their artists, and they would use a lot of pop punk because it's good like background music, and Newfound Glory would get used quite a
That's
bit
kind of cool.
in it. And again, it's music that got put on a lot of those video games and that kind of stuff. It was just part of the culture, faded away a little bit. The album they had in 05 or 06 after this is really good, but it's really like slow, and it was just like they were trying to
I didn't. The one after this, I don't like at all.
yeah, it's sort of like a heavy indie kind of album, and it was considered a flop, and they actually kind of got like
Really?
and they were told years later by the record execs that it wasn't as bad of a flop as the label had thought it was. It was just in 06 they didn't really have a gauge of how many records bands were actually gonna sell.
Dude, isn't it weird how things like that were different?
Yeah,
back
and like
then?
so
Like,
their executive told them,
couldn't.
you were the first band of that year that I put out, so you see like it was the big failure. You were just on par with everything else we put out. Because that album still did do well, and eventually they landed back. In the late 2000s, it seemed like the bands that weren't cool enough to be on Epitaph got to be on Epitaph in like the late 2000s as they were coming off their major label runs. It was like Alkaline Trio, and Newfound Glory.
Dude.
They all kind of just like came back. They all kind of got to live out their dreams and hang out with Brett and make an album. And then I think most recently, Newfound Glory ended up on Hopeless, and now they're on a smaller label. I don't know how much they really need labels at this point, but like Hopeless kind of feels right though, that like from their stylings and stuff
that feels like a good label for them.
Yeah, like when I saw them, I think Hopeless was the one that kind of put that tour together. So they were touring with like this young woman called Lolo, and she was like this like heavy emo. Really was very similar to Newfound Glory, but she was more of a solo artist. So you had more of like the 808 sound within it. But it was like
interesting.
It was like, yeah, Newfound Glory kind of does fit with that sort of the ambiguity of the Hopeless sound, which isn't really have a sound. It's just always kind of sort of had heavy music mixed with this stuff, and it's like, well, Newfound Glory is like a poppy version of that. So I thought they actually did fit well on Hopeless.
Thought of like Mustard Plug when I thought of Hopeless Records. I think they were on Hopeless.
Yeah, those comps, the Hopelessly Devoted to You comps.
I used to love those comps. They were almost as good as the Punkorama stuff.
They had like a million. So they would like, I don't even know if those bands were necessarily on Hopeless or would they just get everyone. Those things were long too, but like good. And it's always about comps. I mean, I remember some of these songs being on comps. It always comes back to comps.
Back in the day, like comps didn't necessarily represent the label 100%. It was like, hey man, can we purchase this song to put on a comp so that we can get people interested in our comp? They'll listen to it, find out our bands, and they might spend, let's say, $1,000 on a song, get it on a comp, and now they have whatever, dude, Joe Schmo and the blah blah blahs as their big ticket item, and they can put on the cover featuring Avenged Sevenfold, which they oddly enough were on Hopeless.
Hopeless. They kept them on those Hopeless comps for years,
as they should have. But that was a weird band to be on Hopeless, though. Avenged Sevenfold.
I mean, like I think you could see like DNA between like an Avenged Sevenfold and a Newfound Glory. They just kind of come at it from the different ends of the heavier stuff and the pop and the punk and all. I
mean, in all fairness, Avenged Sevenfold, they love No Effects, so I mean, they're good in my book. No Effects and Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to describe them. Yeah, the like I was thinking about how you said the songs didn't used to have to be tied in. I was thinking of Fat Mike, like he just had have your song under a minute, and you would put it on his the fast music for fast people that old
yeah,
he would just find these gimmicks of songs to make on comps, which was just a cool thing.
I think that's fun. Fat Mike's got a lot of like interesting ideas. I mean,
like creativity, and then there was like the comps for causes too. So that was another common thing of so like I remember like the the one that the Goldfinger guy came out with, like supporting like animal rights. I remember Newfound Glory was on that one, no effect, like supporting like animal rights or whatever. So whatever like the different cause was. I don't know why I got waxing poetic here about comps and all this, but I forgot about all the different little permutations of how comps could come out. No,
Compilations are very
no
important to punk
equivalent to
rock.
that in like the modern. There's just no way to like that.
Well,
that
nowadays it's
specific
like
thing.
nowadays you have people that do playlists, so like that's, I mean, it's not as accessible because people don't think about it as much. But that's
Yeah,
like that's the new
that's the
age
version of it, and that was what
compilation.
that comps really were the proto kind of playlists
Absolutely.
in a lot of
I made
ways.
mixtapes myself that they were just as important to me as a comp would have been.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, that's how I did that stuff.
Tying it back to our topic, boy, these Catalyst songs were a lot of mixtapes that someone on this podcast made at one point. I can tell you that.
Oh man, Catalyst. I don't think any of these songs ever made it to anything that I made, but I was a little too old when this stuff was popping, bro. I was already too old.
Yeah, I
Like
was 16 in
yeah.
summer of 04, you know.
If I had been 17 when this came out, I might have liked it a little bit more. Maybe. I was pretty insecure at 17. I wasn't really telling people I liked even Blink-182 back then,
Well,
dude.
at Newfound Glory though, again, like they were the band that you could talk about and you wouldn't get shit for. They were like the free pass.
Were they though?
With the people that I talked to, they were. Now looking back at it, they were, but they were also kind of unliked by a lot of different groups though too.
Because man, dude, the people that I was around, they hated Newfound Glory.
But like, did those people just hate old pop punk? Like
Not all of it.
on
They just
principle?
hated like the. I think they hated what you would consider pop punk. They liked what I would consider pop punk. So I guess
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's always I think a distinction is like some of this stuff was just gonna always be hated, and some of it like Simple Plan was actually hated by like
Oh,
people that like pop punk. You know what I mean?
I hate that band. Dude. But whatever though. I mean, I can't do what they did. So what am I talking about, dude? The next few weeks is going to be so freaking fun.
Yeah.
Like
Next week's another one of our sort of
wait till I tell you the next 3
temple
weeks, dude.
episodes.
I've got that 3 weeks filled out. While we were talking, I was like, oh, I need to jump on like 2 weeks from now to have an idea. So I saw some stuff and I was like, I was going to put 2 heavy hitters in 2 weeks. And I was like, nah, let's spread it out. So what I was going to do, May 7th, next week, we're going to do AFI and Teen Idols. So we're doing Black Sails and Pucker Up. I love both of those. So I'm very excited. The following week, I was going to do Pennywise Straight Ahead and Blink-182 Enema of the State because they both dropped on June 1st. And I was like, no. You got to spread those out for 2 weeks, dude. So we're going to do May 14th will be Pennywise Straight Ahead and Pinhead Gunpowder Shoot the Moon. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
And then the following week, we'll do Blink-182 Enema of the State and the Donnas Get Skin Tight because I feel like the Donnas is a pop punk record kind of too. And it'll kind of fit with the Enema of the State talk. Plus, they have a lot of like really cheeky lyrical content. I thought that would fit.
They're the thing we've talked a lot of punk history. They're the one thing they're the whole reason why Lookout doesn't, not the whole reason, but a major reason in Lookout not existing anymore was blamed on the Donnas. So we need to sort of log that into like evidence onto.
Oh
the podcast.
Yeah. I need you to tell me about that because I didn't know about that.
It's a big part of the Lookout. The Donnas are a big part of the Lookout story. Post.
Oh wow, so that video is going to be fun.
All into that.
I like the Donnas. Should I not like them?
No. They didn't do anything. It's just they were sort of in a summation. They were the last heave of Lookout.
Got it.
And so the last resources that Lookout had was kind of used on them.
Got it. Right. Well, this gives us a really great May. The end of May will be a little more difficult, but the first chunk of it's going to be a lot of fun, man. AFI, Teen Idols, Pennywise, Pinhead Gunpowder, Blink-182, and the Donnas. That is a heck of a lineup, dude. I think we got enough heavy hitters, followed by some important but maybe not as famous records.
Change of pace, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what we should do is put the smaller releases up front, like Teen Idols will go first, Pinhead Gunpowder, the Donnas, those will go first, then we'll do AFI, then Pennywise, then Blink.
Send me a fresh text, though, so I can keep this organized in my...
Absolutely. I wrote it down just for this reason, so we're good.
Yeah.
I even put it on my calendar because I have ADHD like a mug.
Because I would hate to come prepared for Anima next week, and you're here talking AFI. We would just have a horrible conversation that would be very...
I don't know, man. If you listen to Blink and I listen to AFI, I think we'd have a great time.
Yeah, I mean, we would, but I'm just saying the common ground might not be there. So
right, all right. I sent you a photo of my notes, so hopefully that works. Yeah, man. Good talk, dude. Jawbreaker, Newfound Glory. I have to say, I'm a little surprised at my lack of enthusiasm, but I have an abundance of optimism. Boy, I said a grown up
Look at that.
sentence.
Yeah.
I know,
Very Jawbreaker-esque right there. Yeah.
kind of right. I listened to too much on this week,
Mhm.
but I do think that at a certain point in time, Jawbreaker is going to click for me, and I think I just don't like this album from Newfound Glory, but they have that really heavy hitter for me because it's like my favorite Newfound Glory song on my least favorite album, while the other album isn't as good as that one song, but like in its totality, I enjoy it more on their
And
other
you
first
have a
two records.
general appreciation for Newfound Glory, though, like as a whole.
Yeah,
You
dude,
seem
and the
to be-
guys
yeah.
are super cool. And I've met singer dude and a guitar guy. I've met both of them a couple times. I met the guitarist a few times because he sang for Shia Lud. But and that band name was great, Shia Lud. Anyways, I don't want to sit here and dog on them, man. I appreciate what they did, and I think that they're overall pretty great musicians. I like their albums enough to have them on, bro. It doesn't bother me. Like, it has to be. It's going to be an odd conversation when there's an album that I actually like, dislike enough to say I wouldn't want it to have it on. There's not much that qualifies for that. Like even the Rancid 2000 talk, like
Yeah. Especially on this show. Like, I don't think we're gonna talk about something that we
yeah, why would
actively
we? Why would we
hate.
cut? Yeah, I was surprised at how much I wasn't into the songs. That's what the deal was for me. Is it
Yeah.
wasn't that I was crapping on them. I just was surprised that I thought I was going to really enjoy it. Again, there might be a day where I go, all right, it has come. I like this album now. So Jawbreaker for sure, I think is likely the candidate for that kind of flip. But whatever, man, can't win them all, dude. I would be a big giant phony if I got up here and said I like this album to every single record we talked about. That's crazy.
Yeah, that may be a little disingenuous.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get punched in the face at a punk rock show in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Anyways, oh man. All right, dude. It's good talking to you, Rob.
All right.
I will talk to you later on this weekend. I'm sure. You got any plans for the week?
No.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be working on this stuff and trying to make some cash. My kid's birthday is next Monday, so next Monday I'll be tied up doing hanging out with my dude, and then yeah, Tuesday back on the podcasting. So all right, brother, good talk, man.
Listen to a lot of AFI. Should be fun,
dude. I'm very excited to hear Black Sails. It's been a while. That's not my favorite album by them by any stretch, but it's one of their good ones to me, and I'm very excited to listen to this album. I like this album a lot. It's like just I know I said it's not my favorite album by them, but that's like on a list of albums that are all like 9.5 or higher. This one's like, oh, it's the 9.5. Like it's amazing. This record's
we are
so
gonna
good.
Be in very much alignment. It's gonna be. I
cannot wait to listen to this record a bunch. So yeah, brother, have a good week, man. I'll talk to you soon, bud.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much, man. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment on this day, give us your thoughts, opinions, and complaints. We want to hear them. All right. Till next time. Peace.